If you are 62 years old and you just maxed out your Roth IRA for 2026, you might have made an $8,600 mistake. That is not a typo. The full Roth IRA limit for someone your age, with the catch-up included, tops out at $8,600 this year. Standard Advice treats that account like the holy grail of retirement planning. For someone between 55 and 65, that tax-free promise can turn into a mathematical mirage. There's a piece almost nobody mentions. If you're planning to move to a lower tax state once you retire, every dollar you put into a Roth today gets taxed at your current state's rate. In California, that rate can run as high as 13.3%. Wait 2 years, become a legal resident of Florida or Texas, and that same dollar gets taxed at zero. Ask yourself where you actually plan to be living 5 years from now. If the honest answer is somewhere other than the state on your driver's license today, that question matters more than almost anything else in this video. I've watched people do this without realizing it. They convert early because someone online told them early is always better, and they hand the state a check they never had to write. This isn't an argument against the Roth IRA. It's about making sure the government isn't the biggest guest at your retirement party. Before you fund that account again, we need to look at a fee your 401k may be quietly charging you, and the real reason a Roth conversion done at the wrong time can end up costing you twice. Start with a number that should bother you a little. The 401k limit this year sits at $32,500. The IRA limit, even with the catch-up, is $8,600. That gap alone should change how you think about where your next dollar goes. That $32,500 number is not a rounding error. It's close to 4 times the room you get inside an IRA. If you're 55 or older and trying to catch up, the 401k is where the real work happens. Picture the IRA as a small, precise tool you reach for once the big structure is already standing. The 401k is what actually builds that structure in the first place. Bigger does not automatically mean cheaper, though, and this is where people get caught off guard. While you were working, your 401k may have felt free because your employer was quietly absorbing part of the cost of running the plan. Once you leave the company, some plans shift that cost onto you directly, charging an administrative fee just to keep the account open, often somewhere between 1% and 1.5% a year. The math behind that shift is not complicated once you see it. Plan providers spread their costs across everyone contributing. Once you retire, you stop adding new money, and so do the coworkers who left before you. Fewer people sharing the bill usually means a bigger slice lands on the account still sitting there, including yours. Put real numbers on that. A $1 million 401k with a 1% fee cost you $10,000 a year, every single year, just for the account to exist. Roll that same balance into a low-cost IRA, holding a plain index fund with an expense ratio near 0.3%. And the same money costs you about $300 a year instead. That gap does not close on its own. It compounds quietly, pulling from money you already spent decades earning. The trade-off most people never see is this: staying inside a 401k out of habit, instead of rolling it over the day you retire, can quietly cost tens of thousands of dollars over a 20 or 30-year retirement, without you ever making a single bad investment decision. The account didn't lose money in the market. The fees simply never stopped running. Before you assume your 401k is automatically the cheap option, ask your plan administrator for the actual all-in fee, not just the fund's expense ratio. Those two numbers are rarely the same, and the disclosure rarely makes that obvious on its own. Even a low-fee 401k won't protect you from a different mistake, one that has nothing to do with fees at all. It has to do with where you happen to be living, legally, on the day you convert money into a Roth. That single detail can be worth thousands of dollars depending on your zip code, and it's called a residency check. The states losing tax revenue take it seriously. Most people planning retirement in a high-tax state like California, New York, New Jersey, or Illinois share the same long-term plan. Work a few more years, then move somewhere with no state income tax, places like Florida, Texas, Nevada, or Tennessee. That plan is smart. The problem is what happens to Roth conversions along the way. This isn't a rare situation either. Every year, a meaningful share of retirees leave high-tax states for places with no state income tax at all, chasing exactly the kind of savings we're about to walk through, often without realizing the timing of a single transaction can decide whether they actually keep those savings. State tax boards do not care where you plan to retire. They tax a Roth conversion based on where you're legally living on the day the conversion happens, not where you're moving to next year, not where you grew up. Where you're a resident right now, according to your driver's license, your voter registration, and the address on your tax return. Meet someone I'll call David. He's 63, living in San Diego, with a plan to relocate to Summerlin, Nevada in about 2 years, once his youngest finishes school nearby. David has two choices, with a $100,000 Roth conversion in front of him. Choice 1. He converts the $100,000 today, while he's still a California resident. On a conversion this size, he lands close to the 9.3% state bracket, which works out to roughly $9,300 handed straight to the state. Choice 2, David waits. He spends the next 2 years finishing the move, gets his Nevada driver's license, registers to vote there, changes his primary address. Then he converts the same $100,000. Nevada has no state income tax. His state tax bill on that conversion is zero. Same $100,000. Same federal tax owed either way. The only difference is $9,300 that either stays in David's account or leaves it, depending on a 2-year wait and a change of address. So ask yourself honestly, is your moving date a real plan with a timeline attached to it, or just something you've been saying out loud for the last few years, without actually setting one? I used to think converting early was always the right call, more years of tax-free growth, less to worry about later. I don't think that anymore, not for someone who already knows they're leaving a high-tax state. For a lot of people planning that exact move, an early conversion quietly becomes a gift to a state they're about to stop living in. Sit with this trade-off for a second. Yes, David gives up 2 years of tax-free growth on that money by waiting, but avoiding a 9.3% state tax bill functions, like locking in a guaranteed return, most investments can't touch. 2 years of patience against a bill that size is not a hard trade once you see it written out plainly. States losing tax revenue do not let this go unquestioned either. California, in particular, pays close attention to people who claim they've left, especially around a big transaction, like a 6-figure Roth conversion. That's exactly why waiting until you have real proof, a new license, a new voter card, a new primary home, matters more than just having a moving date circled on a calendar. State taxes are one problem you can plan around with patience. But there's a different tax bomb waiting further down the road, one a Roth account can actually make worse if you don't time things carefully. It shows up around age 73, and it's called the IRMAA cliff. Required minimum distributions start at age 73. That's the age the IRS requires you to start pulling money out of a traditional IRA or 401k, whether you need the cash that year or not. You don't get to pick the amount either. The IRS hands you a formula based on your account balance and your life expectancy, and you have to withdraw at least that much every year from that point forward. The formula itself isn't punishment. It exists because the government eventually wants its share of the tax-deferred growth you've enjoyed for decades. But the size of that eventual bill depends entirely on how large the account has grown by the time you're forced to start pulling from it, and that part is still within your control today. This is where it gets expensive in a way most people don't see coming. Medicare Part B carries an income-based surcharge called IRMAA. In 2026, if your income for Medicare purposes crosses $109,000 as a single filer, or $218,000 filing jointly, your monthly Part B premium doesn't creep up a little. It jumps from $202.90 a month to at least $284.10 a month per person for the entire year, based on income from 2 years earlier. Now stack those two mechanisms together. Say you have $1,500,000 sitting in a traditional IRA. Your first required withdrawal at age 73 comes out to roughly $56,600, based on the IRS's own life expectancy formula. Add in Social Security, maybe a small pension, and a lot of retirees find themselves pushed straight over that IRMAA line without ever touching a paycheck again. This is where the years between retirement and age 73 become valuable, not just restful. People sometimes call them the gap years, and they're the best window you'll get to convert pieces of a traditional account into a Roth on your own terms, in amounts small enough to stay under the IRMAA thresholds, instead of being forced into one giant taxable withdrawal starting at 73. None of this means a large IRA balance is a bad problem to have. It's still a good problem. It just needs a plan attached to it well before age 73, not the year it actually arrives on your doorstep. The goal isn't 0 required withdrawals. That's not realistic for most people. The goal is making sure the size of that eventual withdrawal doesn't ambush your Medicare premium the same year it ambushes your tax bracket. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second, though. What if you're not the person with $1,500,000 sitting in an account? What if maxing anything out has never really been on the table for you? Does any of this still matter? I see the comments. People telling you to max out $8,600 a year, while you're covering a mortgage, helping with a grandchild's college costs, and trying to keep something in savings for the roof that's clearly on its last few years. If that's you, you might feel like you've already lost this game before it started. You haven't. That feeling has a name. It's called all-or-nothing thinking, and it convinces good savers to do nothing at all because they can't do it perfectly. If you can't hit the max, your brain quietly decides that not trying feels safer than trying and falling short. There's a shift worth making here. A Roth IRA isn't only a retirement account. It also works as a flexible emergency fund, and almost nobody explains that part clearly. The money you personally put in, your contributions, not the growth on top of them, can be withdrawn at any time, tax-free and penalty-free, no matter your age. That's not a loophole. That's just how the account is built. Compare that to a 401k, where pulling money out before age 59 and a half usually triggers both a tax bill and a penalty on top of it. The Roth simply doesn't work that way for your own contributions, and that difference matters more than most retirement content ever bothers to explain. Which means a small, steady Roth balance, even one built $100 a month at a time, can double as one of the safest places to park what might otherwise sit in a low-interest savings account. It grows if you don't need it. It's still reachable if you do. I remember a client who wouldn't put money into a Roth because she was convinced it was locked away until she turned 70. When I showed her she could pull out what she'd personally contributed, no penalty, no waiting, for something like an unexpected roof repair, you could watch the tension leave her shoulders. She wasn't behind. She just hadn't been told the whole rule. If $100 a month is genuinely what you have available right now, that's not a failure. That's a starting point, and starting points are allowed to be small. Small and consistent beats large and abandoned. That's really the whole point of this section. There's a scenario almost nobody plans for on purpose, because nobody wants to think about it. One spouse passes away, and the surviving spouse moves from filing taxes jointly to filing as a single person, usually starting the very next tax year. Tax brackets for single filers run roughly half as wide as the brackets for a married couple filing jointly, which means the exact same income, the same required withdrawal, the same pension can land in a noticeably higher tax bracket just because of that filing status change. Picture a couple with $80,000 in taxable income, comfortably inside the 12% bracket together. If one spouse passes away and the survivor keeps roughly that same $80,000 in income as a single filer, a large piece of it can spill into the 22% bracket. Not because they earned more, but because the bracket itself got narrower under their new filing status. This is where a Roth conversion, done while both spouses are alive, stops being just a tax play and starts being something closer to an act of care. You pay the tax now, while the joint brackets still apply and the bill is smaller. Your spouse doesn't inherit that tax bracket problem on top of everything else they're already dealing with. Nobody wants to plan around losing a spouse, but the couples who do end up protecting whoever is left behind from a tax bill that has nothing to do with how much they saved and everything to do with a filing status they never chose. This isn't about assuming the worst. It's the same reasoning behind buying insurance you hope to never use. You're not predicting a tragedy, you're just refusing to leave the person you love with a bigger bill than the one you would have paid yourself. So how do you actually put any of this into action without setting off a tax mess? Here's a short checklist to work through. Step 1. Pull your 401k's fee disclosure and check the administrative charge. If it's sitting above 0.5%, plan on rolling it into a low-cost traditional IRA the day you actually retire, not years later. Step 2. Run the residency check. If there's any real chance you move states within the next 3 years, pause new Roth conversions until you're settled in the new state, with the license, the registration, and the address to prove it. Step 3. Use the extra $6,000 senior deduction available for people 65 and older. Applied against a modest Roth conversion, that deduction can offset most or all of the tax owed on it, making a small conversion close to tax-free in the years it's available. None of these 3 steps require guessing. They require checking a number, checking a date, and checking your age, then acting accordingly. Run through all 3 once a year, ideally right after you file your taxes, while the numbers are still fresh in front of you. If you want to see the real math behind that senior deduction worked out in full, hit subscribe. I cover this kind of thing regularly. None of this makes the Roth IRA a bad account. It just means it's a tool, not a rule. Use it to protect a surviving spouse from a brutal tax bracket. Be careful with it if you're about to change states. And always check what your 401k is quietly charging you before you assume the Roth is the only lever worth pulling. Retirement isn't really about who ends up with the biggest number. It's about who ends up with the most choices. Don't let one trendy account, no matter how popular it is online, take those choices away from you before you've even had the chance to use them. Subscribe to Wes Investor for more retirement math that actually holds up. I'll see you in the next one.